I'm happy to have the opportunity to talk about Sri Aurobindo and his relationship with the Veda today. As you know, the Veda are the earliest wisdom teachings of India and perhaps of the world. And Sri Aurobindo had a special relationship with the Veda and how that relates to his own teaching. And so that's what we'll explore today. I've also named the talk Sri Aurobindo and the Vedic Mystery Schools, because when Sri Aurobindo talks about the Veda, the case he makes for it being a wisdom tradition is by pointing to the fact that similar teachings in the West, in Greece, have been taught through mystery schools. He makes this point in his Secret of the Veda. We don't know whether the Veda was taught in mystery schools. We don't have any evidence of it at this time. But I mention it and I'll touch on it during the course of the talk. To start with, a quotation from Sri Aurobindo. I seek not science, nor religion, nor theosophy, but Veda, the truth about Brahman, not only about his essentiality, but about his manifestation, not a lamp on the way to the forest, but a light and a guide to joy and action in the world. I believe that the future of India and the world to depend on its discovery and on its application, not to the renunciation of life, but to life and the world and among men. The Veda was the beginning of our spiritual knowledge. The Veda will remain its end. These compositions of an unknown antiquity are as the many breasts of the eternal mother of knowledge, from which our succeeding ages have all been fed. The recovery of the perfect truth of the Veda is therefore not merely a desideratum for our modern intellectual curiosity, but a practical necessity for the future of the human race. For I believe firmly that the secret concealed in the Veda, when entirely discovered, will be found to formulate perfectly that knowledge and practice of a divine life to which the march of humanity, after long wanderings in the satisfaction of the intellect and senses, must inevitably return. So he gives a very great scope to the Veda. As we can see from that teaching, the central message that he gives is that it's a world-affirming spirituality. It's an inclusive spirituality, a spirituality for transforming life. And that's the spirit in which he saw it, and he wrote of it. Sri Aurobindo's writings on the Veda are carried in his book called The Secret of the Veda. It used to be called On the Veda earlier, and it was part of his writings in the journal Arya, along with a set of hymns called Hymns to the Mystic Fire, which represent his translations and commentaries of one of the books, the hymns to the Atris, the sages called the Atris in the Rig Veda. Now later Sri Aurobindo was to say that he had not had an opportunity to really talk about the Veda as he knew it in his later life, and that the secret of the Veda does not complete his knowledge of the Veda. So there is unfinished understanding as far as the Veda is concerned. The Secret of the Veda contains a lot of his interpretations of the various Vedic gods and the symbolism behind it. What I'm going to try today is to unpack that symbolism and maybe point to glimpses of what was not said in those books. First, to talk a little bit about the background of the Veda. The Veda is a set of 10 mandalas, or they're called volumes, but basically they are hymn cycles or sets that are named after different seers or rishis and their lineages of families. And of these, once we study them, we find that some have a closer relationship to each other and form a core that could be called the ancient core of the Veda. And these are volumes or mandalas 2 to 7. And we may surmise that they go back to, some people say 1700, some people say 1900 BCE to about 1500 BCE. A large number of the hymns of this corpus are attributed to a set of rishis called the Angirasa rishis. And Sri Aurobindo has a chapter on the Angirasa rishis. The word Angirasa literally has to do with fire. And the Angirasa rishis are considered to be the ancestors of the rishis of the Veda, perhaps the ancestors of human beings. And Sri Aurobindo sees they're called Pitri, which means the fathers or forefathers. And these ancestors are like what are later called avatars. They're like self-born embodiments of the solar energy. They're like sparks of fire. They're like hot coals. And they bring words that embody the fire of the sun. This is essentially what the Veda is about. The Veda literally means knowledge. And the central power of the Veda is the power of the word. And the word itself is considered to be a manifestation of fire. And this is the fire of the sun. And so this is the Upanishads themselves will look at it like that. In the transition from the older to the later spirituality, the Upanishads will say, out of the mouth of Purusha came fire, and the fire was the Vedic word, the word of the Veda. So these are the forefathers. In a way, the corpus of hymns represent an ancient teaching that comes into the ken of historical mortality from some earlier age that is shrouded in the mystery of antiquity and belongs to the forefathers, the Angirasa rishis. And we'll see why Angirasas are important, because to the Angirasas is attributed the oldest and central myth of the Veda, the myth of the Angirasas, and we'll get to that later. The remaining Rig Veda mandalas, perhaps from 1500 to 1200 BCE, and then the other Vedas, as you may know, there are 4 Vedas. The Rig Veda is the oldest and the most original. All the hymns are original. The Yajur and the Sama Vedas are largely repetitions of the Rig Veda with a few other hymns. The Atharva Veda is the last of the Vedas with a larger number of original hymns, but later hymns. And the Brahmanas and Aranyakas, etc., span the time period from about 1200 to 1000 BCE. The Yajur Veda contains pointers to ritual, Yajus, and the Sama Veda contains pointers to chanting, Saman, which is singing or chanting. The Atharva Veda is chronologically the last and contains a large number of original hymns mixed in with magic spells, and is supposed to have been either the origin or a borrowing or a co-revelation along with a body of Indian spiritual teaching called the Tantra. The principal Upanishads are written from about the 7th century BCE to the 5th century CE. So these are, the Upanishads are considered to be the last leg of the Vedas and constitute a body of knowledge that spans a later period. So when we talk about Veda, today it's difficult to tell what we mean by Veda. Is it all this literature? This is called Vedic literature. And the great teacher Shankara, when he came, used the word Veda, but what he meant was the Upanishads. And in a kind of sleight of hand, he pushed aside the rest of it and said, Vedanta, meaning end of the Veda, is the Upanishad, and that's what we need to worry about. The rest of it is all ritual stuff. But what Sri Aurobindo is saying is that there is a vast difference historically and thematically between the early Veda and the Upanishads. There is a continuity, but there is a difference as well. And we are concerned with the Veda, not with the Upanishad, in today's talk and in Sri Aurobindo's writing on the Veda. So if we look at the existing interpretations of the Veda, the traditional one by teachers like Yaska and Sayana is ritualistic. In other words, how are these hymns? Okay, the Rig Veda, the 4 main Vedas are called Samhitas. Samhita meaning song books, books of verse. And the use of these verses in rituals, mainly fire rituals, rituals in which there are sacrifices of a variety of substances to fire, are considered to be the major interpretation of the Veda in the traditional sense. So these are the traditional interpretations. The Western Indological interpretations of the Veda go back to people like Max Muller, and they look at it as naturalistic poetry. Max Muller was going to look at the Rig Veda and say that this is wonderful nature poetry that belongs to the early origins of the primitive human race. So these are they may be wisdom literature to a certain extent, but basically they are hymns to the nature forces. Then there is the archaeological or historical way of looking at the Veda, which has come about and has gained prominence today, particularly due to nationalistic interests. And these are talking about geopolitical understandings of the Veda. They talk about the Aryan invasion theory, and now nobody talks about the Aryan invasion theory, but they talk about the Aryan immigration theory. and the abbreviation remains the same. And then to counter it is the Indian nationalistic version of the out of India theory. So these become historical ways of looking at the Veda as talking about a people and their geopolitical movements. Sri Aurobindo is going to look at the Veda in psychological or yogic terms. And as I said, one of the rationales he's going to use to not justify what he's doing, but actually to constellate what he's doing with world teachings is to connect it to the mystery schools of Greece. But was Sri Aurobindo a little further ahead in time, he could have seen that these myths of Greece were being interpreted psychologically by psychologists like Freud and Jung. Freud himself looks at, his central myth, which is the Oedipal myth, is taken out of the Greek myths, and we find that he's using it to talk about depth psychology, to talk about what is happening in us, but at a very primitive level of the human psyche. While Jung looks at some of these Greek myths as well as other world myths, and Joseph Campbell takes it into a more world situation, and they look at it in terms of individuation, how we come into our own, how we grow beyond the private lives of individual beings and become more universal. How can we reach the universal? And in a sense, one would say that Jung's understanding of the Greek myths comes quite close to Sri Aurobindo's understanding of the Vedic myth in terms of a spiritual destiny of the human being. Sri Aurobindo goes a little further in actually seeing this individuation process as involving a total transformation of the human down to the body and a transformation of nature itself, a cosmic transformation that is talked about in the Veda. So we'll get to that in a moment. This is part of the equation of the macrocosm and the microcosm that is involved in the understanding of the Veda. Sri Aurobindo's encounter with the Vedas was in his early days in Pondicherry, and they were through his yogic experiences of three goddesses mentioned in the Veda. We'll see his words on this, which he states explicitly, something he rarely does in his public writings. And he says that he was having certain experiences in which the names of these three goddesses kept repeating themselves in his visions and experiences, and he was given to understand what they meant. And so he actually invokes his experienced understanding of part of the Veda, which gave him the key to the understanding of the rest. This is how he got to it. And these are the three goddesses, Ila, Saraswati, and Sarama. And this comes to him after his Upanishadic realization of the Brahman. And he begins his passage on this by saying that his understanding till then had been that the Vedas were ritual literature, and that the real wisdom literature of India began with the Upanishads, which is the received understanding from Indology, from Western Indology. And that it's only his own experience that convinced him otherwise and gave him the key to a deeper understanding of the Veda. So he had already the experience or realization of the Upanishadic Brahman, that is reality as a conscious entity or being, and the Gita's realization of Vasudeva Krishna in all things. And he called these two the passive and active aspects of Brahman. The experience of these three goddesses and of the teaching of the Veda relate to something else which constitutes part of his understanding of the human transformation. And when he was in the jail, undergoing trial as an anti-colonial agent, he had a number of spiritual realizations, and he talks about these as 4 major realizations. But without going in depth into those, I'd like to mention that one of them was the passive Brahman experience of a silence and a presence that pervades everything but is outside of it, a transcendental spiritual presence. Another was the manifestation of that particular presence in the world that he called the active Brahman. But these two could both be seen as a transcendental and a cosmic realization of the one being. But the third really important thing that happened to him in the Alipur jail was that he claims the visitation from the spirit of Vivekananda, who he claims showed him the future of human evolution in terms of ranges of mind that had not yet been realized. That we were here to evolve into greater and more cosmic ranges of consciousness, mental and supramental, beyond what has been realized by us at this point. And it is this aspect of the ascension of human consciousness beyond its present reach that he felt was being shown to him through the Veda. This is what those three goddesses represented. They represented the connection between our present state and a future state of the human consciousness. I'll come to it later. Please hold your questions at the end. We'll talk about questions later. So this was related to the formation of an intuitive mentality. Sri Aurobindo pays a lot of importance to this later because the ground of certitude and knowledge is a central fact or factor for human existence. We are creatures who have knowledge but are always uncertain about our knowledge. And we try to look for grounds of certainty. And we can have either of two grounds. We have to have a ground of certainty that we can agree upon as a collective, as a humanity. And the simplest ground that we can find is matter. It is matter and the constitution of the human in terms of the senses and the mind. So it is this empirical / ideal structure that becomes the ground of our certitude, which constitutes modern knowledge. But Sri Aurobindo was to call that inferential knowledge. It's all inferred. We use our senses upon something that we assume or take for granted as real. And the structure of our senses is only giving us inferred knowledge. We don't know it because we don't experience it. Can there be direct knowledge? And this is the big question, and Sri Aurobindo was to say that this is what the Veda is talking about, how to arrive at that. And to arrive at that, you have to have an intermediate stage from the rational mentality to a supramentality. And the intermediate stage is what he called an intuitive mentality. How can we intuitivize our knowledge completely? Creating that is the central work of an integral education. So this is what, to build the mediation between the knowledge of the senses and the mind and full certainty through identity. One has to build an intuitive relationality, an intuitive mentality. So that is something that these goddesses were giving him. This is part of the Vedic understanding that he was getting. So for him, the Vedas were part of a divine transformation, the descent of a divine consciousness transforming mind, life and body. And that's because this intuitive mentality, though we are calling it mentality, is more like an intuitive, integral consciousness. We have to intuitivize our minds, our lives, and our bodies. So we can get to that later, and if there are questions, I can take them up later, but that's what he was looking at. So he sees the Veda as carrying the knowledge of an ascending and descending process. We rise to a level of certainty and we bring down a different kind of perception, divinizing the human being and the material earth. So this is the scope of the Vedic knowledge. To quote him, my first contact with Vedic thought came indirectly while pursuing certain lines of self-development in the way of Indian yoga, which without my knowing it was spontaneously converging towards the ancient and now unfrequented paths followed by our forefathers. At this time, there began to arise in my mind an arrangement of symbolic names attached to certain psychological experiences which had begun to regularize themselves. And among them there came the figures of three female energies, Ila, Saraswati, Sarama, representing severally 3 out of the 4 faculties of the intuitive reason: revelation, inspiration, and intuition. It did not take long to see that the Vedic indications of a racial division between Aryans and Dasyus and the identification of the latter with the indigenous Indians were of a far flimsier character than I had supposed. He's referring to the geopolitical interpretation. But far more interesting to me was the discovery of a considerable body of profound psychological thought and experience lying neglected in these ancient hymns. And the importance of this element increased in my eyes when I found first that the mantras of the Veda illuminated with a clear and exact light psychological experiences of my own, for which I had found no sufficient explanation either in European psychology or in the teachings of yoga or of Vedanta, so far as I was acquainted with them. And secondly, that they shed light on obscure passages and ideas of the Upanishads to which previously I could attach no exact meaning, and gave at the same time a new sense to much in the Puranas. So this is the key to a lot that was completely obscure and that nobody else was really giving any explanation for. So the process of the Vedic ritual is called yajna. So this is what we understand of the Veda today, and through a very long period of history, that it is a rite or a ritual called yajna, which means literally sacrifice. And the principal deity in that sacrifice, as the process of sacrifice, is the fire. Fire called the fire god Agni. Agni, the fire god, is lit, and that is the real priest of the Vedic yajna. There is a priest that offers a sacrifice to the fire, but the fire is the priest of the sacrifice. The offerings are clarified butter called ghritam, soma, an intoxicating drink, and the mantric word, rik. Of course, there are other things as well, including grain, sometimes animal sacrifices, and perhaps in the origin even human sacrifices. But basically these are the main constituents of the external sacrifice. The main god invoked in many of these rituals is Indra. Indra, Sri Aurobindo says, is the divine mind. In the body of the Rig Veda, the largest number of hymns are to the god Indra. Indra is considered to be the divine mind. Remember, we were talking about cosmic ranges of mind above the human mentality. The highest cosmic range of mind would be presided over by Indra, the god of the divine mind. But Indra is not the principal deity of the Veda. The principal deity of the Veda is the sun god. And we'll get to that in a moment. Indra is a representative or a emanation of the sun god. We'll see how that happens in a moment. The other gods that are invoked are Rudra, Maruts, Vishnu, Brihaspati, Soma, and the Angirasa rishis. Helpers in the ritual or in the invocation are Usha, the dawn, Ashwins, twin brothers who come during the dawn, Sarama, who is like a hound, a dog, a hound. Ila, Mahi, Saraswati, all goddesses, and all other gods, sometimes called all the gods in one name, Vishwadeva, okay? The universal gods. The fruits of the sacrifice in terms of the external Vedic ritual are cows, and the word cow itself, an Indo-European word, is related to the Sanskrit word go or gau, and that has a double meaning. It means cow and light. And the reason this is the case, we have to go back to the primitive symbology of the Vedic people, the life of a early agrarian society that looks to the sun as is the source of life, agrarian life, and the cow as one of the most powerful domesticated animals that helps in creating that agrarian life. So these are the two. In fact, the cow is equated with the sun. We'll see how the mother of the gods is the solar cow, Aditi, who gives rise or birth to the suns, not just one, but a number of suns. We'll talk about that in a moment. So the horses are another very powerful domesticated animal, and just as the cow represents light, the horse represents power, gold, heroes, and offspring. The human hero, the greatest of the heroes are the Angirasa rishis, the ones who brought the Veda, the word, the fire, just like Prometheus brought the fire. These are also divine humans who brought the fire in the form of words. Other results of the hymns are destroying the darkness and its agents and making the sun rise. And so the hymns and the rituals are considered to have three levels of understanding. One is social. So in the social level, these are collective performances. These rituals are performed in groups, and they are performed to establish the dharma, or the order of society, of the world, and essentially keep the order harmonious. Okay. Secondly, they are applied cosmically, and that is in terms of the seasons, the agrarian cycles, and this larger, more universal understanding. And thirdly, they're applied psychologically. And this is where the whole notion of the mystery schools comes in. So we can ask the question, how are they applied psychologically? The ritual itself may be a psychological device. The ritual, whether we talk about rituals today in India like pujas, or we talk about rituals conducted by esoteric sects like Tantra, are dramatic structures of intensity in which every particular element evokes a certain movement of consciousness. So that is one way of understanding the ritual at an individual level. If you focus on every particular element of it as something belonging to the movement of consciousness inside you. A second way of understanding it, which is not available to us today, but could have actually been the case during the time of the Veda, is as they have been used in mystery schools. In other words, there could have been dramatic performances connected with the Veda. There is a mythology or a number of mythologies related to the Veda. And these mythologies could have been enacted in initiatic methods, in ways, in which there were various kinds of stages or steps that were taken as initiations of preparation and experience. The central ritualistic device in a Vedic ritual is the fire altar. And the fire altar has a number of shapes. It could be square, circular, polygonal, or it could be shaped like a bird, as you can see. All these shapes later turn up in what are known as the tantric yantras. They all constitute a sacred geometry with significance that are numerological significance. The process of the Veda has a symbolic language attached to it, and Sri Aurobindo clarifies that by saying the Veda has a double aspect, and the two, though closely related, must be kept apart. The rishis arranged the substance of their thought in a system of parallelism by which the same deities were at once internal and external powers of universal nature. And they managed its expression through a system of double values by which the same language served for their worship in both aspects. But the psychological sense predominates, and it's more pervading, close-knit and coherent than the physical. The Veda is primarily intended to serve for spiritual enlightenment and self-culture. So we are looking at those various uses, and Sri Aurobindo is privileging the psychological use and saying that's the real reason why it's given to us. The sons of the infinite, that is the gods, have a twofold birth. They are born above in the truth as creators of the worlds and guardians of the divine law. They are born also here in the world itself and in man as cosmic and human powers of the divine. In the visible world, they are the male and female powers and energies of the universe. And it is this external aspect of them which gives us the eternal or psychophysical side of the Aryan worship. But in man himself, the gods are conscious psychological powers. And in saying this, what he's doing is he's giving us one of the major contributions of the Veda in human history. And when that contribution is to show the equivalence of cosmology and psychology, of the macrocosm and the microcosm. The fact that the cosmos is replicated in each entity, particularly in each human being. See? And so the Veda bring that knowledge. Prior to the Veda, we had other forms of spirituality, more animistic in nature, that had a relationship with the spirit entities around us. But to talk about the entire cosmos as having a certain structure that's replicated in the human, and the relationship between the two so that one can influence the other both ways, is a contribution of the Veda, perhaps the earliest contribution in the Veda. So we can look at a number of these firsts as far as the Veda is concerned. Firstly, it is a panentheistic henotheism. These are big words, but to unpack it, what it means is that this is the first time we are being told there is only one being that has become all other beings, that is above and transcendental and inside the cosmos, in and as everything. So there is one divine reality manifest as the many gods and the many beings. Okay? Secondly, there is an equation of cosmology and psychology. Firstly, cosmology itself is a psychology. In other words, what we are looking at as the cosmos, the entire universe with all its planets, its internal energies, whatever is driving it, is a being, a consciousness. We are talking about a cosmology of consciousness. Secondly, that consciousness, that cosmology of consciousness goes all the way down. It goes down to all the entities and it goes down to matter itself. Everything is psychological. Secondly, then we have this equation of the macrocosm and the microcosm, which we can see in two ways. One is through correspondence. The entire ancient world, until we come to the modern age, believed in the theory of correspondence. Theory of correspondence means that everything is related so that every entity is corresponding to some other entities. This is the basis of what is called sympathetic magic. You can connect with something else because of its sympathetic correspondence to that other thing. The entire cosmos is related through correspondences. So that is one way in which the Veda presents this relationship of the macrocosmos and the microcosmos. The second way is fractal identity. And fractal identity means that the small is structured like the large and actually is a replica of the large connected fully with the large. It's the miniature of the large. It's both the same in a one-to-one correspondence and identity. This will become the reason why the individual human can become a cosmic being and can actually have an effect on the cosmos, including a transformation of the cosmos. Next, it brings in the idea of 2 points of view, and this is very, very important because this is not something which happens in modern times with Galileo discovering the heliocentric, or Copernicus discovering the heliocentric theory. The Veda contain a heliocentric view of the cosmos, but they also contain a geocentric view. I may say that in saying that, I'm not actually giving any privilege to the Veda or to India. The medieval Western world also had both a heliocentric and a geocentric view of the universe. Depended on where you wanted to be, you could look at it from both, and it was important to look at it from both points of view. The heliocentric view was the transcendental view. It was the view from above, from which everything was seen as a world of diversity, but which could be seen as the world that stayed transcendental, one, unchanging, above. And the geocentric view was the view of the alternations of the dualities. Things always changed. It was a fragmented world, and it was a world in which things always moved from one to the other. So we find these 2 points of view clearly delineated in the Veda. Next, we find that they contribute the idea of verticality, and that comes automatically when you posit a heliocentric and a geocentric view. You have a heaven and an earth, and you have the axis mundi connecting the heaven and the earth. You have something which is a vertical axis, and there is the notion of climbing and descending that axis. This becomes one of the major contributions of the Veda. Then there is solar mythology. So this is related to both the heliocentric and the geocentric view. There is one way in which we can see the sun as the center of the entire system, the solar system, and another way in which we can see the sun as descending into the earth and being reborn. So these cycles of rebirth of the sun, this is part of its solar mythology. That is the center. That is the Angirasa mythology. The mythology that comes from the ancestors. Finally, we are being given 2 kinds of practice: an external or exoteric ritual practice that we just talked about through the yajna, and an internal practice, which is the practice of yoga, and that we just talked about as well. So to summarize, reality is divided in two zones in a vertical relation. One is the foundation above, called Upari Budna in the Veda, or the solar realm of everlasting light. The second is the realm of the alternations of day and night, called Ahoratri, meaning day and night. They are sometimes called the two mothers or the two sisters, often spoken of as a wheel above. The sun itself is seen as a wheel. The sun is hidden by the demons in this realm and needs to be released. When you're looking at, so there are a variety of ways of looking at it. If you're looking at it from the pure heliocentric view, there is no duality. If you're looking at the dualities from the heliocentric view, then there are the two mothers and the two sisters. But if you're looking at it from the geocentric point of view, then there are gods and demons. You see, there are these three ways of looking at the same thing. And they've been hidden by the demons and need to be released. Each of these zones are further divided into three levels. So in the upper zone, these are called the three luminous summits, Trini Rochana, made of three elements, three dhatu, sometimes called swar. Now swar is going to be the term that Sri Aurobindo identifies with supermind, that actually is mediating between the three higher realms and the three lower realms, or the realm of heaven and the realm of earth. Swar is the mediating link where the one and the many are both seen together, where the many are known as the self-transformations of the one. So we have here that realm, and in the lower, the lower also has three. They are Prithvi, Antariksha, and Dyaus. Prithvi is earth or matter, Antariksha is the mid-world or the world of life, and Dyaus is the heaven world or the world of mind. These zones are inhabited by beings. In the upper zone are Aditi and the solar gods. It's the solar realm. It's the realm of the sun, but there's not just one sun, there are many suns there. There is the one solar principle which is seen as feminine, as the goddess Aditi, the mother of the gods, who gives birth to the suns, the mother of the suns, S-U-N-S. These sons or solar gods are called the Adityas, the descendants of the Aditi. In the lower zone are the gods, mortal creatures, and demons. This cosmology of consciousness is folded into each individual being as a psychology. This is the correspondence. We have the same kind of cosmology inside each of us. We are born into the night. So it is just as we see the alternations of day and night, we belong to the night because we are born into ignorance. And we have to rise to the day. So for that, we have to release the sun that is hidden in us. And we'll see in the mythology that the sun is hidden in us in a way in which it is a special emanation of it is fire. Fire is the property of the sun that is in each of us. And that holds the key to releasing the sun in each of us. And we'll see in a moment how that is done. The mythology of the Veda ties its cosmology and psychology together. I have a few diagrams clarifying this. We'll see in a moment. But so again, to summarize, the heliocentric view shows us the supramental realm, Swar, having the sun, Surya, and having a kind of fire, the solar fire, called Surya Agni. So this is the link for the Veda connecting the words, fire. Fire is that which connects the words. So we have Surya Agni, solar fire. In the realm of day and night, Ahoratri, in heaven, you have Indra. Now you see in the realm of day and night, during the day you have the sun itself. But during the night, in the darkness, the sun takes the form of Indra, the thunderer, who with his lightnings shows up tracts of land. And with that lightning, we can proceed. So lightning is like a power of intuition. See? So we have the thunder and lightning, which is also a kind of fire. And the Veda calls it electric fire, Vaidyuta Agni, electric fire. And we know that it is electricity, actually, which is the power of the lightning. And in the life world, which is the mediating realm, fire is invisible and takes the form of energy, as the wind, Vayu, or Rudra and the Maruts, the very powerful energy gods. And on earth, the fire god Agni is the material fire, Jada Agni. Jada Agni is the fire that we light, and psychologically it is the fire inside us which is given to us by the forefathers Pitri and is in the form of the word. Shabda Agni, the fire of the word, which is the mantra fire, the subjective reality of Agni, concentrated fire of invocation. So the solar godhead in the heliocentric realm is the Surya Agni. We see that it is originally a solar principle given a feminine form called Aditi, and out of her are born these suns, SONS/SUNS, and 7 of them. It's interesting that unlike in the Greek mythology, you find that Athena is born from the head of Zeus. Here you find that the sons are born from the head of the goddess of Aditi. And out of her head, ascending out of her head, are 7 sons. And then the 8th son is not born from the head, but goes descending from the bottom. And so there are 7 upward births and 1 downward birth. The 7 upward births give rise to the 7 sons of the supermind, of Swat. And the downward one is called Martanda, which literally means the dead egg, or the egg of death. And this egg of death, or dead egg, is the earth. It is this realm of mortality, the mortal realm, matter itself. And so this earth is seen actually as a sun that is like a dead earth, a dead egg that has the potential of birthing the sun. The sun is cold. It's a cold sun, essentially, over here. But here too, the fire of the sun is burning as fire, just as we know even in physics, the plasma, the center of the earth is fire. So too, every creature has a fire burning inside, which is going to be the power by which this earth itself is rekindled and becomes what it truly is and what the other suns are. Now, what are the other suns? We don't have time to go into the entire mythology or the kind of symbolic meanings of the different suns. But the 7 suns are Mitra, Varuna, Aryaman, Bhaga, Anshu, Indra, Dhatri, and then Martanda is the 8th. Now, these 7 correspond to the 7 layers of existence. And the 7th one is matter itself. So Dhatri is actually the earth in its supramental form. So there is a perfect solar form of the earth. So we can say that these 7 represent the heavenly archetypes. And the earth is an evolutionary form that is moving towards its own heavenly archetype, the Dhatri form. So we find that the first four are the most important. They're called the four kings. Mitra, Varuna, Aryaman and Bhaga. Mitra is the god of love, Varuna of vastness, Aryaman of force, and Bhaga is of the creative and receptive bliss. The creative energy of joy and the receptive energy of joy. So these are the four. The daughters or consorts of Swar are Usha the dawn and Savitri. On the other hand, inside the geocentric realm, the realm of Martanda, we have Dyaus or heaven, with Indra, the god of thunder, and electric fire of Vaidyuta Agni. Its female agents are Ila for sight or revelation, Saraswati for hearing, Sarama for power of penetration or intuition, Dakshina for the power of discrimination, and we have the stellar powers, the forefathers or Angirasa rishis, who wield fire in their words or mantras, called riks. Rita, how are we doing for time?
Yeah, we're fine. It's fine.
We have some time?
Go to 12:30 at the
Okay,
latest.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
But yeah.
So we find that I'm summarizing here because there's a lot of material, so kind of condensing it a little bit. The three luminous words called Tri Dhatu, they are later called Satchidananda in the Upanishads. So these are the three luminous words. Swar, which is the fourth word, the solar word of Aditi or Surya, is called by Sri Aurobindo Supermind, and in the Upanishads is called Vijnana. Dyaus or heaven are the three mental cosmic minds, three cosmic minds. Sri Aurobindo has names for them: illumined mind, intuition, and overmind. Then it's also Mana of the Upanishads. Antariksha, the middle words, are the words of life. Bhuvar Loka or Prana of the Upanishads, and Prithvi or earth is also, there are three earths. Okay, three earths. The most dense one is the world of matter. There's a most subtle earth, and then there is an even more subtle earth, which we can think of as the supramental earth. But we have the world of matter as in these three forms called Marta Loka or Bhu Loka, Annam of the Upanishads. And you will notice that I have them in different colors. These two form the upper hemisphere, the heliocentric realm, and these three form the realm of the alternations of day and night and the divisions of fragmentation of the creatures. So that is the geocentric realm. The words of Aditi, this is the same, three dhatu, three luminous words, Satchidananda of the Upanishads, Swar, supermind, Vijnana or Karana of the Upanishads, and the words of Diti, the words of Aditi, the undivided mother goddess, and the words of Diti called Rodasi, meaning the two words of day and night, having three heavens of the mind, worlds of cosmic mind, the mid-world or Antariksha, and the three earths. Now, actually, each one of them is three. Even the mid-world has three words of life. And these are what get represented in the chakras. Later, you'll find the chakras. We have three chakras connected with the earth, not one. It's not just the Muladhara. There is a chakra at the level of the knees and a chakra at the level of the toes. Those constitute the three chakras of earth. Then you have three chakras of the life world, one at the sex center, one at the navel, and one at the heart, and three chakras of the mind, one at the throat, one between the eyes, and one at the crown. And above the crown is the supermind. So these three of the mind, three of the life, and three of matter are connected with 3 worlds of the Veda, 3 earth worlds, 3 life worlds, and 3 mind worlds. These are the characteristics of the solar world, Swar or supermind. It's described as having truth, order, and vastness. So Satyam, Ritam, and Brihat. These are the 3 major characteristics, just like Satchit and Ananda in the Upanishads. This is, of course, the supermind. That's why Ritam is a very important fact. Ritam means order, and it's a dynamic order. It's a principle that has proportionality to it. It knows how to divide. So that is one of the kind of ways in which the one becomes the many. This is the reason, the secret of the way in which things become manifest in certain parts. See, the whole and the parts. It has itself got 7 planes, and those are the 7 suns, corresponding to the 7 worlds. And that's why it has 7 suns, because each of the suns is the supramental version of one of the 7 worlds. See? You can see that this is like a kind of a holism or integralism in which everything is in everything. So that each level has got its own varieties of the other levels. It only is foregrounding one particular type of consciousness, but through the filter of that consciousness, all the other consciousnesses are present in it. The Swar is also the home of Surya Savitra with his Shaktis and daughters, Usha, Savitri, Saraswati, Ila, Sarama, Dakshina, Mahi, and his emanations, that are the 7 sons, the 4 kings that I spoke about, and the other sons. It is the origin of the gods Indra, Vishnu, Rudra, Vayu, Varuna, Brihaspati, Agni, Soma, and others. It is the origin of the 7 cows, who are actually the 7 knowledge aspects of the 7 gods or 7 sons, Sapta Gava, and the 7 rivers that are the force aspects. You can see these are the being and the becoming. The flow of the oceans, or the cows, are the rivers. So the 7 rivers, Sapta Nadya, aspects of power, and the 7-fold word of Brihaspati, which relates to the power of the word, Mantra Shakti, the power of the word in the 7 realms. Now, interestingly, over time, the way in which the Veda is used today is that it has become fragmented and has become essentialized into a few lines of verses. These verses are popular and very important. They are in use in pujas today, and also many people repeat them. But you find that these really important lines of the Vedas actually give us the essence of what we've talked about so far, the heliocentric realm particularly. So looking at some of them, the mantras of the solar world of supermind, highlighting the simultaneous oneness and plurality. Okay, it is one and many at the same time. Comes to us in these 2 hymns or these 2 verses. One is from the number 164 in the first mandala, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Padanti. There is one truth, the wise speak of it variously. So this is again the one solar power, and all the gods we are talking about are really transforms of the sun. These are all transforms of the sun. It is the one God that becomes many different gods, and we approach it through different gods. And that's why the same myth is going to be told in a million different ways in the Vedas, through the eyes of different gods. The Angirasas do the same thing. The sun god does the Indra. Indra breaks the rock and releases the sun. Angirasas break it with their word. Indra breaks it with his lightning. And you find Sarama goes into the rock and pulls out the hidden creatures. And so you find all these gods are transforms of the same solar godhead. Ritena ritam apihitam dhruvam vam suryasya yatra vimuchanti ashwan dasa shata saha tasthus tad ekam devanam shreshtam vapusam apashyam. By the truth is veiled that ever-standing truth of yours, where they unyoke the horses of the sun. There the 10,000 stand still together. That one I have beheld, the greatest of the embodied gods. So this is again, the sun, solar godhead is seen as a chariot, and we find that this is seen as the supramental source where the one and the many are seen at the same time. The sun and its horses seen at the same time. The 10,000 stand together with the one. And this particular hymn to Vishnu is often the starting of any puja. And even interestingly, pujas to Kali are begun by this hymn because it is really under the auspices of Vishnu as a solar god. Vishnu is another name for the sun god. Vishnu is the sun god as the pervading light of the sun. And so we find that under the auspices of Vishnu, everything happens. And so this particular hymn, Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam Sada Pashyanti Suraya Diviva Chakshuratatam. Salutations to that Vishnu whose supreme station the gods behold at all times, like an eye wide extended in heaven. So this is a solar image, but interesting the point is that this is a heliocentric image. The gods are constantly looking wherever they may be. All they see at all times is at the center, Vishnu, like an eye wide extended in heaven. Then we have the notion, the most important of the Vedic hymns in India. All the pujas constitute the gods in terms of the Gayatri mantra, invoking that particular deity in terms of the Gayatri mantra. And all Brahmins have to repeat this mantra many times. And this is the Gayatri mantra, supposed to be the most important mantra of the Veda. Om Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. We meditate on the most blessed form of the sun god Savitra. May he illumine our intelligence. So who is the most blessed form of the sun god Savitra? We've just talked about that. It's the one where the sun unyokes his horses. It is the supramental one where the one and the many are seen at the same time. And that is being invoked as the power to illuminate our intelligence and build the bridge between the rational mind and the supramental mind, which is really the intuitive mentality. So that is the sense of the Gayatri mantra. So the Vedic mythology is related to these cycles, the alternations of the seasons. And it's interesting that Sri Aurobindo tends to agree with Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who who speculated that the Arctic people were the originators of the Veda. And he says the reason is that they're not talking about the alternations of the sun as happening over a day, but a kind of a day that lasts for 6 months. See? So it's like a seasonal day and a seasonal night. And so this notion of a seasonal day and a seasonal night is coming from the forefathers who came from some place where they saw a kind of day and night like that. And so this is the cosmic rotation of days and nights, and it relates also symbolically speaking, the season is our whole life. Our life is a life led in darkness, and it can be a life led in the sun. So it's birth, death, rebirth at the human level. This is seen mythologically as the descent of the sun into the earth and the capture by the forces of darkness. And then its release either by the word of the Angirasa rishis, by the lightning of Indra, by the power of Rudra, by the force of Agni, helped by the goddesses Saraswati, Ila, Dakshina, and Sarama. This is the central mythology. Now, this is also given in many variations. And also we find other subsidiary myths, including the myth we just talked about of the birth of the 7 sons from the goddess Aditi, and the 8th son, which is the earth, Martanda, of Vivashwan, born downwards. Third important mythology there comes from the 10th mandala, and the 10th mandala is a late mandala. And so we find that the mythology starts changing in it, and new ideas come in it. And one of them is the notion of the sacrifice of Purusha. So idea of the Purusha as a kind of a theistic divine, as a god who is not named the sun god, but who sacrifices himself into this cosmic world with all its beings, and also divides part of itself. Again, this is panentheistic. Part of it remains untouched. Part of it is divided into 4. And these 4 are what are today called the 4 castes. Okay, the Brahman, the Kshatriya, the Vaishya, and the Sudra. Now, this dismemberment of the one is again another way of seeing the heliocentric turning into the geocentric. But what's important to note is that the change of language from the older hymns to the new hymn is carrying the significance over. The Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra is really a mapping of the 4 kings, of the solar gods, Mitra, Varuna, Aryaman, and Bhaga, into a new language. Okay, I won't elaborate on that, but this is something that you can think about. This is happening in a new way. It's a new language and a new mythology. But we find that this is the dismemberment of the divine being into all creatures and the 4 types of being, and carries in it an implication of a return from the fragmentation to the unity by discovering both individual and collective oneness. This becomes the mission of the Vedic journey. Ultimately, the Vedas begin with a hymn to the fire god and end with a hymn for collective unity. Now, here is again where I bring up the Mediterranean solar mystery cults of Osiris, Dionysius, Orpheus, Persephone, Christ himself. Christianity is nothing but a mystery cult to Christ. And the idea is the same. It's a solar mystery cult of the sun god that comes in a human form and sacrifices itself so that there can be a return back to the same divinity by that to which it sacrificed. And so this solar descent into the underworld, all these myths are about that. And a sacrifice and dismemberment and a rebirth into divinity. This is the center of the Vedic myth as well. And this is the reason why it is very possible that there were mystery dramatizations related to this entire Vedic circle that Sri Aurobindo is referring to when he talks about the mystery schools, of Vedic mystery schools. And he also refers to this in terms of the secrecy that can be applied to all these schools. But all this could only be safely done by a difficult and careful training, discipline, purification of the nature. It could not be done by the ordinary man. If men entered into these things without a severe test and training, it would be dangerous to themselves and others. This knowledge, these powers could be misused, misinterpreted, turned from truth to falsehood, from good to evil. A strict secrecy was therefore maintained. The knowledge handed down behind a veil from master to disciple. A veil of symbols was created behind which these mysteries could shelter. Formulas of speech also, which could be understood by the initiated, but were either not known by others or were taken by them in an outward sense, which carefully covered their true meaning and secret. So we find that the inner methods that are being used, techniques, some are rituals. The rituals themselves can be rituals of initiation and rituals of inner experience. Some are visualization, internal visualization or dhyana. Each of these hymns can be visualized, and in the visualization they can actually become active in our consciousness. They are magic incantations or mantras. By actually repeating these hymns, there is a power in them that reveals them, that brings the force that is locked in them, makes them active in our lives. Aniconic visual symbolism, because they are related to these geometries that of altar construction that have their own aniconic power. Mythological dramatizations through mysteries or rahasya, and yogic processes of aspiration, gathering oneself and focusing one's intent, which is related to Agni or the fire god. Processes of breath related to Vayu or the wind god. Opening up receptivity of intuition, that is openness to Indra or the god of lightnings. And the yoga of bliss, of the purification of one's sense life, which is related to the god Soma. These are all forms of yoga that are involved in the Veda themselves. I want to conclude by talking about two experiences of the mother. And they relate to the Veda in this sense that Indra and the Angirasas, and also I want to relate it to a larger context. Indra and the Angirasas rescue the cows from the cave of the robbers, Panis, led by Vala. These are the demons. This has a parallel in the Greek myths of Apollo's divine herds, which were hidden by Hermes in a cave. Indra also destroys Vritra, the serpent of the inconscient, and releases the 7 rivers. This has parallels in Apollo's slaying of Python and later of Krishna's subjugation of Kaliya Daman. These images pop up in a meditation of the mother from her prayers and meditations, November 26, 1915. The entire consciousness immersed in divine contemplation, the whole being enjoyed a supreme and vast felicity. Then was the physical body seized, first in its lower members and then the whole of it, by a sacred trembling, which made all personal limits fall away little by little, even in the most material sensation. The being grew in greatness progressively, methodically, breaking down every barrier, shattering every obstacle, that it might contain and manifest a force and power which increased ceaselessly in immensity and intensity. It was as a progressive dilation of the cells until there was a complete identification with the earth. The body of the awakened consciousness was the terrestrial globe, moving harmoniously in ethereal space. And the consciousness knew that its global body was thus moving in the arms of the universal being, and it gave itself, it abandoned itself to it, in an ecstasy of peaceful bliss. Then it felt that its body was absorbed in the body of the universe and one with it. The consciousness became the consciousness of the universe, immobile in its totality, moving infinitely in its internal complexity. The consciousness of the universe sprung towards the divine in an ardent aspiration, a perfect surrender, and it saw in the splendor of the immaculate light the radiant being standing on a many-headed serpent whose body coiled infinitely around the universe. The being, in an eternal gesture of triumph, mastered and created at one and the same time the serpent and the universe that issued from him. Erect on the serpent, he dominated it with all his victorious might, and the same gesture that crushed the hydra, enveloping the universe, gave it eternal birth. Then the consciousness became this being and perceived that its form was changing once more. It was absorbed into something which was no longer a form and yet contained all forms, something which, immutable, sees, the eye, the witness, and what it sees is. Then this last vestige of form disappeared, and the consciousness itself was absorbed into the unutterable, the ineffable. The return towards the consciousness of the individual body took place very slowly in a constant and invariable splendor of light and power and felicity and adoration, not by successive gradations, but directly, without passing again through the universal and terrestrial forms. And it was as if the modest corporeal form had become the direct and immediate vesture, without any intermediary, of the supreme and eternal witness. Remember Vishnu in that hymn, Om Tat Vishnu Paramam Padam Sada Pashyanti Surya. Now, what we just read is Sri Aurobindo's translation of Mother's French. And the French was written in a letter that she sent to Sri Aurobindo when she had left Pondicherry and was in Japan at the time. And Sri Aurobindo's response to it was, the experience you have described is Vedic in the real sense, though not one which would easily be recognized by the modern systems of yoga which call themselves Vedic. It is the union of the earth of the Veda and Purana with the divine principle. An earth which is said to be above our earth, that is to say, the physical being and consciousness of which the world and the body are only images. But the modern yogas hardly recognize the possibility of a material union with the divine. And I want to end with another prayer of the Mother, July 21st, 1914. This experience expresses the vertical axis connecting the supermind to the earth, which is the aim of the Vedic yoga to establish at the individual and collective levels. There was no longer any body, no longer any sensation. Only a column of light was there, rising from where the base of the body normally is to where usually is the head, to form there a disk of light like that of the moon. Then from there the column continued to rise very far above the head, opening out into an immense sun, dazzling and multicolored, whence a rain of golden light fell covering all the earth. Then slowly the column of light came down again, forming an oval of living light, awakening and setting into movement, each one in a special way, according to a particular vibratory mode, the centers above the head, in the head, the throat, the heart, the middle of the stomach, at the base of the spine, and still further down. At the level of the knees, the ascending and descending currents joined, and the circulation thus went on uninterruptedly, enveloping the whole being in an immense oval of living light. Then slowly the consciousness came down again, stage by stage, halting in each word until the body consciousness returned. The return of the body consciousness was, if the memory is correct, the 9th stage. At that moment, the body was still quite stiff and immobile. So, to conclude, Sri Aurobindo's notion of the Veda, a last stanza about its value for the future. The Veda sees the human being as infinite. Sri Aurobindo calls the human being as a transitional being. There is no end to the transition of the human. And the Vedas are that which establish the continuous journey of the aspirant. The priest of the word climbs thee like a ladder, O 100-powered. As one ascends from peak to peak, there is made clear the much that has still to be done. With that hand.
Thank you so very much.